Hello guys, and welcome to the voice blog part 2. So in the previous episode we were talking about what makes singing difficult, and I had some comments about various things. One was specifically saying that singing isn't difficult, that it's very easy. And in a sense they're right. When you have efficient coordination and sufficient knowledge in your singing, singing becomes easier and easier and easier, like anything. When you watch a good tennis player, they will make it look easy because it actually is easier for them than it is for somebody who's less efficient, because they're doing less work. They're coordinating muscles more efficiently, so therefore they're coordinating less muscle at once, so they're using less energy. And also the efficient movement is just appealing to the eye, because it's almost ingrained in our kind of psyche in a way, this appeal and this desire to observe and to engage with efficient use of the body. So singing is hard when you've made it hard, when you've learnt it in a way that isn't efficient, and that has a lot of interference from outer muscles, wherever they may be. I see singers do this, and you're thinking your vocal cords aren't in your shoulders. But to lesser degrees, there's other muscles. The tongue, for example, the muscles here under the chin, in the middle of your jaw, the swallowing muscles you can feel there if you put your thumbs in there. I'd say the biggest ones for tension that directly affects your voice, because you can have some outer tension, some outer muscles activating in your face and in your forehead, for example, or in your shoulders. They won't really directly impact the sound coming out, because if I go they don't really affect it. So I will say that you can have some outer muscle interference that doesn't necessarily have a big impact on the sound. But the muscles that do, the outer muscles that do have a huge impact on the sound, I would say, are the swallowing muscles here. You can feel them when you swallow in there. You can also feel your larynx going up and down when you swallow. Those muscles. The muscles in the tongue. And the muscles in the jaw, really. And also these muscles will have some impact. But see, the problem with the jaw and the mouth, if that's being confused with the process of using your voice, is that you start struggling to pronounce words clearly. See, when you use your voice, when you sing, there has to be a clear separation between the jaw and mouth and the words that are being pronounced, and the tongue, and the muscles that are coordinating the voice. This is completely separate to this. So what you'll hear some singers do is they will go, they will sing, and then as they get higher, wider, wider, and then before you know it, they can only say words like this, and it makes no sense. And it sounds strange, because they don't have quite enough separation between the mouth and tongue and what the voice is doing. So one of the key things that you're learning is to separate out these muscle groups and to get rid of muscles that you don't need and separate out the muscles that you do need, which is the muscles in the larynx, which control your pitch and the amount of compression, and the pronouncing muscles, as in the tongue, the mouth, the jaw, and the lips. These have to be separated out. So this is why you can get singers like Jimmy Necco's a good example of this, who look like they're straining, and to some degree they have really good coordination in a lot of their voice, and to some degree they'll have some outer muscles that habitually come in at different parts of their voice, but those outer muscles will tend to be muscles like I'm doing that to show you, muscles that don't necessarily have a huge impact on the sound. They might have a little, but they'll have nowhere near as much impact as if this group of muscles is habitually tightening up as the singer goes up in pitch, or the tongue is interfering with the process, for example. That will have a much bigger impact, and it won't necessarily, it will look subtler to the eye. So to the eye, if a singer moves up in pitch and their face and everything looks relaxed, but as they go up, moving their tongue or interfering with the process of their tongue, or these discrete muscles under here are interfering, the sound will actually be impacted more than if they look like they're really getting into it. The reason that is because these muscles directly impact the larynx in a very direct way, obviously. So when I swallow, the larynx goes up and down. So if those swallowing muscles are influencing being involved in the vocal process, then literally the sound will directly be impacted. Whereas if that's not necessarily going to directly impact the sound. Do you get me? Do you get what I'm trying to get across? So the most important muscles to become aware of if you're trying to improve with your singing and you're struggling are the swallowing muscles here. You have to get those out of the process. There's no other way around it. If you're singing up higher and you put your thumbs under there and you can feel that they're starting to tense up, you will struggle with singing. Simple as that. No way around it. You have to get rid of these muscles that are interfering with your singing. The tongue is another big one. And the jaw. This can't be tensing up. It has to be separate from the vocal process. So, that being said, I wanted to give you some exercises to help you start to become more aware of what you're doing when you're singing. And I'm going to give you 3 exercises. Let me just get up my list. And what are these exercises for? Well, they're actually probably going to be exercises you've done before. But with exercises, it's not so much the exercise and what you're doing, it's more what you're focused on when you're doing the exercise that's more important than the actual exercise itself. Because I could say, oh, just do some X, Y, or Z exercise and just keep doing it and you'll improve. And to some degree that's true. You will gradually improve when you're doing exercises because they tend to discipline your focus. Because when you sing a song, there's so much going on that if you don't know what you're doing, it's very hard to focus on the right things because there's tons and tons of stuff going on. So what exercises do is they break down the process and you can just focus on very simple things and basic things. And then when you go back to singing, you can take those basic things, the foundations that you've learned, and you take them into more complicated combinations of vowels and syllables and different levels of compression and different levels of volume. But that all comes after the basic foundation. So, what you're going to focus on when you're doing these exercises. If you're struggling with your voice, especially with range at the top of your voice, you need to focus on these three basic things really. 1, is the compression staying the same? 2, is the airflow staying the same? And 3, what are the outer muscles doing? So chances are, if an exercise goes wrong, the first thing that you can ask yourself is, have I changed the amount of compression I was using? Did it stay consistent? And did the airflow stay the same? And to an extent, these two things are interchangeable, because when you squeeze more, the airflow inevitably gets cut off more, and if you don't, and obviously if as you push through more air, you won't be able to squeeze as much. So this is why teachers often will get you to focus on airflow exercises if you're an over squeezer, because the airflow inhibits you and essentially prevents you from being able to over squeeze, because it's impossible to over squeeze if you've got enough airflow, and vice versa. If you're if you're not squeezing, then the airflow will be even and consistent. So I want you to focus on consistency of airflow and compression as you move up and down the scale. But I also want you to focus on, especially if you're really struggling and feel strain, I want you to focus on these things that I've mentioned. So as you go up the exercise, you're concentrating on keeping the airflow consistent and the compression consistent, and not letting it change no matter what. And you're thinking, if things do start to change, and often if you're struggling they will, you're thinking, why is that changing, and what am I doing that is changing it? Because if you keep the compression and airflow the same as you move up and down an exercise, and you don't influence it with these outer muscles, then the exercise will go well. It's just simple, a simple reality, a simple fact. If that's all staying consistent, it will go well. So if it doesn't go well and you're straining, you are doing something wrong. That is what I'm trying to get across to you. So as you go up the exercise and down the exercises, I want you to be thinking, and if you struggle, what am I doing that's making me struggle? And you will notice, if you start thinking about that, you'll notice things. You might start to notice that as you go up, something's changing. You're doing something subtly, maybe with your tongue. The tongue should just be relaxed and rested behind the bottom teeth, and that's it. And it shouldn't be gradually doing things like this as you go up. That will impact the sound. These muscles here can subtly start to press down, and this is evidence of the outer muscles coming in. So you have to become aware of this interference before you can start to become stricter in your mind and say, I'm not going to accept that. I want better for my voice, and I'm going to start to get rid of that. This is one of the reasons teachers are so good, because they'll give you an exercise like, they'll say, they'll notice that you have some interference with your tongue. So they will say, okay, put your tongue out and go ah, and they'll get you to do an exercise like that, and you'll think, that's like, what is that all about? It sounds awful, and it does sound awful, but the reason they've told you to do that is because if you stick your tongue out and keep it out, and you have a habit of bringing it back and interfering with the press with it, that cancels out the outer muscle interference that you had with your tongue. And as soon as it cancels out, you'll have more freedom and you'll become more aware of that interference. So think as think as you're going up and down these exercises, what if you're struggling, what am I doing that is impacting and influencing this exercise? Am I interfering with these muscles? If the answer is yes, then you need to start getting rid of them and need to start becoming more aware of when they're interfering with the process. If you're struggling less and you're doing relatively well with your singing, and you find that I can do this, like, yeah, it's working, it's all fine, but I flip when I go up higher, or I can't quite stay connected. That's where, or it goes area at the top, for example. That's when you need to focus on what the inner muscles are doing. So, is my compression staying the same? Is the airflow staying the same? And at that point, if you get those things right, the exercise will go a lot better for you. So things that you want to listen out for, if the exercise starts going wrong, the exercises start going wrong for you. I know I've said this, but I've just thought of something else. Is the sound moving? And by that I mean, so if I go like this, you can hear the sound move. That's a very obvious demonstration of that. But there are many subtler manipulations that will have a slight impact on the sound. The sound has to stay in the same place and stay consistent, and that's a result of a good exercise. But what you're listening for is a consistent buzz. That has to be there at all times. Not has to be through the whole exercise. I can't go and expect the exercise to go well, because I'm changing what's happening. So that brings us to the first exercise of the 3 that I'm going to give you today. The first is the hum, which I just demonstrated somewhat, but this is the reason the basic hum can be so good for you. And these exercises aren't going to be scales, they're just going to be sliding up and down throughout your range. Because I think often that is a good way to find out, what am I changing? What am I doing that's impacting this sound as I go up? So the first exercise, humming. So, a slide with a hum, what can you focus on? The things I mentioned, but it's very good at focusing on the sound being in the same place throughout the exercise. If I go and it's wrong, the sound's moving. It's more obvious, it's very obvious when the sound moves with a hum. So, compression consistent, airflow consistent, check, check, no outer muscles. I can start with that. Just the chords coming together and airflow. And I keep it the same. Now, I'm not particularly well today. Those hums are actually going better than I'd hoped. But what I will say is, I'm focusing on keeping the sound in the same place. I'm focusing on keeping the compression the same as I go up and down. And I'm moving into head voice without too much difficulty. And my head voice isn't great today. So, if this is what's happening as you go up, something like like I did before. The reason my fingers are here is it's a good way to monitor these swallowing muscles. So with the tongue, when you hum, the mouth should be closed, completely closed off. You should feel your tongue resting behind the back teeth and pressed against the top of your mouth, and it should not move. Nowhere in the scale should that tongue move. So one thing you can focus on is the tongue staying consistent, relaxed, and in the same place. From to the very top back to the bottom, it should not move at all. No reason for that tongue to. It has nothing to do with the vocal process. It has everything to do with pronouncing words, but we're not pronouncing any words. We have the mouth closed, so the tongue is not needed at all. Second, under here, you can feel and you can think, are those muscles, when you swallow you can feel them. If that's happening as you go up and down, then you know you're interfering. Start to become aware as you're doing your humming of these things. And once you're aware of it, then you can start to undo anything that is there. Hello guys, thank you very much for watching the first half of this episode. Please comment, rate, subscribe. The second segment of this episode will be next week, and there will be a lot more about the exercises and a lot more information. Have a good week guys, thanks for watching, bye.